In example number 1, excuse me, we have 3/7 x plus 9 equals 15. And so we want to start to peel away the parts away from x. Now, anything that's directly attached to x through multiplication or division is going to take place last, unless we have some parentheses to deal with. So we'll start this process by eliminating the 9 from the left side. So we want to eliminate the 9 from the left side, and the way we do that is by subtracting a 9. So a positive 9 and a negative 9 gives us 0. But the golden rule of algebra says if we subtract something from one side of the equation, we should also subtract that from the other side of the equation. And so you can choose to write this out, or you can choose to work that in your head. Either way is fine. What we have in effect is an elimination or a canceling of those 9's, and then of course 15 minus 9 equals 6. Now, we see this last step, 3/7 times x. So anytime we have a variable right next to a number with no operational sign, you'll recall that that simply means multiplication. We could do this in 2 steps if we wanted, but we're going to pick the simpler method of multiplying by its reciprocal. And so if we multiply by the reciprocal, what happens is the 7's on top and bottom cancel each other out, and the 3's on top and bottom cancel each other out. Now, of course, if I multiply 7/3 to the left side, I also have to multiply those times the right side. And when I do that, I multiply it times 6, and it's going to leave me with x is equal to 14. And we can see here that the x value is isolated, and so that would be the end of our steps. So that should be a good review of a number of skills that you learned in Algebra 1. At this point in time, why don't you go ahead and pause the video and work Part A of sample problem number 1. Use the example above as needed, and get x by itself. If you notice, there's something missing with these problems. It's kind of implied that you should be solving for x. Technically, the directions should say solve above both of them, telling you that your job is to get x by itself. If you see a problem like this without directions, it's implying solve for the missing variable. And so sometimes we'll use a y or an a or b other than x. So we'll get started. First thing we want to do is we want to add 14 to both sides. Now you can see that I've chosen to use the method of stacking up the 14's. If you want to do that step in your head, you're more than welcome, and I'm going to recommend that as you progress through Algebra 2 that you'll definitely want to start doing those steps in your head. The problems tend to get a little bit lengthy, and it'll just save you some space. So negative 14, positive 14 cancel out, simply leaving 5x on the left side, and then we are left with 35 on the right side. Now, 5x equals 35. 5 is being multiplied by x. The way we undo, I guess if you could say, break apart multiplication is through the division process. So I'm going to divide by 5, and if I divide one side by 5, I must divide the other side by 5. So these 5's will cancel out, leaving me simply x is equal to 7. And I've solved for x in that problem. Alright, very good. Part B is very similar. I'm going to start by subtracting 6 from both sides. Now, I'm going to do it in my head this time. So if I subtract 6 from the left side, I know that those 6's cancel out. If I subtract 6 from the right side, I have negative 21 and negative 6, which is going to give me negative 27. Now I have 9 attached to the x through multiplication, so I'll undo this with division. Again, I'm going to do this in my head this time. So if I divide the left side by 9, I'm just simply left with x. And if I divide the right side, I'm left with negative 3. You can see how, comparing Part A to Part B, how doing some of the simpler steps of algebra will clean up your work and be able to do it in a lot less space. This will be a very important skill that you will want to retain for later whenever the problems get a little bit longer. Okay, that was a quick introduction to solving equations. We will look at some more in-depth problems as we go along through the videos.